Hey, all you Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our workplaces can fix our world, as we get started, like we say every single week here, your network is your net worth. Neither are big enough. So drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat and let's get going here. We got the pump prime. We got 150 emojis already. So let's get a nice emoji explosion to welcome everybody back. Drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat and try to connect with at least one person. You know, if you're not bringing your team to this thing, if you're not talking about the Ethicsverse to your friends and family, if you're not, trying to build this network and take advantage of this really unique opportunity that we have here, you're leaving so much impact on the table. You're leaving so much career progression on the table. Remember, you get no bonus points in life for reinventing the wheel. So reach out to somebody. I mean, we have this really collegial industry. I've never heard anyone reach out to somebody else and not get some help and not get that call answered. And that's such a unique thing. And I'm going to keep talking about it until I feel like everybody is, taking advantage of it. Check out the Ethico library. There's tons of thought leadership coming out. You got to, come to the Ethicsverse, of course, but you got to, when you're walking your dog or you're doing your dishes or the kids are being loud, they're on a podcast. There's so many great podcasts out right now. Check out this QR code and you can see the entire Ethico library. Is this pushing? Okay, here we go. Check out this QR code. You can check out the entire Ethico library. We're adding more and more books all the time. There's more and more books coming out all the time. We've talked to, the last few guests on the ethics experts have had books. So you got to keep sharpening that sword. And, you have this tool, you have your mind as a goal seek mechanism, and you just have to feed it. You just have to feed it problems. You have to feed it new perspectives. And it's amazing how your subconscious mind will work things out. So take advantage of that and keep feeding yourself. Speaking of feeding of yourself, can you tell I haven't had lunch yet? The ethics experts, we broke through. Round of applause for the ethics experts, the fastest growing ethics and compliance podcast in the world, top 2% global podcast. People care about business ethics, which is phenomenal. We blasted through 200 episodes. We are ripping out tons of episodes right now. Our goal is always to just add value, to create a soapbox that someone can stand on and share their perspective. Literally, I've learned so much from just doing these, and we've gotten so much great feedback. We continue to keep it going. We have couple of great episodes out, so check those out. Okay, speaking of the ecosystem, Ethico's software tool, we've poured millions of dollars into this tool over the last couple of years. We've taken tons of feedback from people on the front lines, and we are trying to build tools that allow for us to build, true cultures of integrity, build tools that allow us to demonstrate our effectiveness and really drive a lot more efficiency. We're at this inflection point right now. A lot of us are still working in old tools that in private equity circles famously haven't been updated in 9 years. These cash cow machines that really are hemming us up. And, it's kind of, many people feel like they're running through the mud in ski boots. That's like a very hard way to run. So if you feel like that and you're looking, you're aggravated about, yet another change getting pushed over to somebody else, you have a gun to your head and they're forcing you to a new platform that you didn't sign up for, and you just want to kind of see what else is out there, I would encourage you, I'm a little biased, but I would encourage you to just check out this Promised Land promotion. So if you're coming from NavX and you're coming from, OneTrust / Conversant / EQS or any of these other major players out here, you can get up to a year free to make that transition nice and easy. We have flexible terms in terms of when you can start your contract and up to a 15% discount for what you're paying right now. So you can upgrade your program very quickly, drive a lot more engagement. A couple of other quick announcements. Next week, we have our world famous benchmark report that has been on the calendar for a couple of weeks. NavX is putting theirs at the same time. So we're going to go head to head and see who gets more viewers. But our benchmark report is coming out. There's a lot of great insights in it, a lot of cool movements in some of these metrics as more and more of us are starting to take this next gen approach to building our program and driving more engagement, particularly at that middle manager layer. So we're going to be diving into that next week. I encourage you to come. And with that, I'm going to pass it to the one and only coolest guy in compliance. We have an August panel today. Look at these faces. Round of applause. One more round of applause as I pass it over to Matt and we dive into our quarterly hot topics session.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick. And hello to everybody who is joining us. I know we have at least a couple of hundred attendees. Glad to see you here. Yes, this is our quarterly look at emerging and current events in ethics and compliance and our close cousins, the HR field as well. I have a lot that we want to talk about. Our panel today is me and Nick as usual, and also Karen Moore of it's Soundboard Consulting, correct, Karen? Did I get that right?
Sounding Board Compliance, pretty close.
Sounding Board Compliance. who has been with us as well and is a former compliance officer herself, Diana Trevely, who is the Chief Compliance Officer at Ethico. Hello, Diana. Glad to have you here.
Great to be here.
And so here are a couple of the broad themes I was thinking that we could talk about for the next hour. Number one, obviously, talk about what the Trump administration is signaling for compliance and enforcement right now. And that is not to get into an argument about, is Trump destroying the country? Is he saving the country? You can have those fights on a different webinar somewhere else. But he is doing what he's doing. And how must corporate compliance functions think about this shifting landscape? And what is that going to mean for the capabilities your organization will have? More specifically, point number two, I think maybe some talk about how we can handle specifically the rollback of DEI programs, because I'm always struck that that is a rather difficult needle to thread between an improper DEI program, but a necessary anti-discrimination program, because you still need those, and discrimination law is still a thing. So maybe some questions around that. There are some enforcement actions and other interesting items in the news. I wanted to talk a bit about leaks, because what do employee leaks of confidential information say about your company's speak up culture? I have seen news of large companies going on firing expeditions to get rid of leakers that have been in the headlines. And just this past week, I was at the SCCE Europe conference, which was excellent, but attended a session on leaks and how do you handle them if you're running an investigation, or if you have a lot of them. What does that mean for your deeper corporate culture? And I saw a few attendees from the UK. I also was at a great session on the UK failure to prevent fraud law, which is going into effect in London later on this year. So if you have exposure to Britain, you have to think about what are our procedures for preventing fraud, trying to prevent fraud. So there's a lot of discussion there about how do compliance and anti-fraud play well together to prevent those kind of abuses. So we have a lot that we can cover. And certainly everybody listening, if you do have your own ideas or comments or questions, pop them into the attendee chat and we will put them to our attendees, our panelists, as soon as we can. So with all of that out of the way, I guess I did want to start first with the Trump administration has been sending a lot of signals about lighter enforcement, paring back regulation and deregulation, and it can be disorienting for compliance professionals. But maybe I'll start with Karen and then Diana and then Nick. Like, what would be your first bit of advice to compliance officers about what should they say to senior management or the board about all of this stuff? Everybody's reading the same headlines, and you say, well, here's what this means for our compliance capabilities right now. Karen, and then Diana, and then Nick, what would you advise people to tell everyone else?
Well, first, not to panic. I think it's really easy to wake up in the morning, read what's new, and say, oh my God, what am I going to do now? The reality that we're living in is that compliance programs are fairly robust. They're designed for multiple purposes across multiple risk areas. Deregulation, we haven't really seen actual deregulation at the moment. We've seen a lot of talk, we've seen a lot of instruction, we've seen a lot of orders, we've seen a lot of rhetoric. We have seen instructions on the enforcement side, either back off from enforcement or speed up enforcement. And I do think companies need to take a look at that, especially if they're in one of these kind of target groups where the DOJ has been instructed to identify and find and target certain companies and organizations on their DEI policies, just as an example. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, administrations come and they go. Public policy is certainly something companies should pay attention to, and I totally understand where companies start to maybe adjust some of their public policy leaning directions in order to capitalize on the current wind. But I think that the important instruction here, the conversation compliance officers need to be having with their boards, with their executive leadership, is what is our totality of stakeholders. We're not only looking at the regulators, we're not only looking at the administration, we're also looking about what's good for our employees, what's good for our third-party relationships, what's good for our customers, and starting to do what they should be doing anyway, which is a little bit of navel gazing. Who are we as a company? What do we stand for? What's important to us? What's important to our key stakeholders? And not be tempted to react overly quickly to changes in enforcement or rhetoric.
Diana, what would you say?
Yeah, I think what Karen said was, brilliant. The first thing is don't panic, and that compliance programs are built to be robust in the sense that they don't have a single stakeholder. It's not just the federal government. There's state governments, there's counties, there's cities. If your organization is international, those regimes, particularly in Europe and emerging now in Latin America and some APAC countries, extremely robust regulatory enforcement. So I think, it's important to keep in mind that, while the federal government is obviously historically has had a record of, let's say, enforcement of, just by way of example, the FCPA, there's many other things going on that require a compliance program, and a very robust one from the regulatory side. And then if you're a vendor, for example, your customers are going to want to see that compliance in place. Contractually, they're going to want it. You're going to want to do good things for your customers and make sure that you've got a great reputation. So I think it's important to look at it as a prism. And right now there's a certain messaging from the federal government that, regulation, there's too much regulation, there should be less enforcement. But I think that that's just one messaging, and it gets a lot of attention in the media. Also, in terms of actual messaging to the board, I would point out to them that most of the enforcement actions we see at the federal government level are for things that happened years ago. We don't know who's going to be in power or what administration is going to be in power, or what Congress is going to look like in the next 4 or 5 years or 15 years down the road. So I think letting your leadership know that they need to take the broad view and the long view and why compliance is important. And then I have one final thought. I do think it's actually a nice segue into a conversation with them about maybe becoming more agile, because I do think that there's, in the zeitgeist, this frustration with, we're too many rules, too much regulation, bogging down things. You sort of hear people saying, oh, good, I hope they get rid of XYZ, without maybe realizing what that then means down the road. But I think it's it might be a good way to reframe the conversation of, hey, we maybe need this new tool that's going to help us move faster and work smarter and make us do less busy work. Maybe we need to revamp a little bit, and maybe, if the federal government's making some changes, maybe we can make some changes, but in a smart way. So I think you can maybe use that if you sense there could be some traction there as a way to potentially reinvigorate the program.
So, Nick, I want to hear your thoughts too, but specifically, I want to kind of refine the question based on what Diana and Karen have both said, that maybe we will have fewer regulations, and maybe you could pare back or make more agile some of your regulatory compliance apparatus. But to Karen's point about the totality of stakeholders, which I loved, there's all this talk about maybe making compliance easier, but there's an important line to be drawn out that nobody is saying make your ethics weaker, make your integrity weaker. And one of the people here in the attendee chat just said, keep your policy, do the right thing, because you're not going to go wrong with that. It's a simple point, but I think it's a powerful one. But tell me some of your thoughts here, Nick.
So, it's interesting how there are some people who make money when the market's up or the market's down. And there's some people who only make money when the market's up. And so the point is, when the market's changing, there's always opportunities, and it's on us to open our eyes to those opportunities. Anytime there's change, there's just opportunities like Diana was saying, to reposition, to reframe, to make some changes to your program that are, more effective. Okay. So I think utilizing some of these utilizing some of these changing winds as tailwinds to drive more impact forward in the organization is super critical. I mean, look, to your point, I just wrote an article, highly reviewed article, by the way. Just kidding. I just wrote an article about this control paradox. How, when you think about it, like the creation of rules is what sort of spawns wrongdoing. So the answer is rarely more rules. Like there was a study done where people were, they were testing seatbelts, and certain drivers were getting in more accidents due to the seatbelts. The control prompted some of the behavior that that the seatbelt was trying to prevent, right? So there's some level of that going on in the organization. And so to kind of Diana's point and kind of to what you referenced regarding that comment, I think the more we can push into principle-based programs as opposed to like layers and layers of, lacquering layers and layers of more rules, the more we can push to principle-based programs, I think it allows us to be a little bit more common sense, to come across to the business as, sometimes we talk about compliance as the seatbelt, and I don't think that's true. Compliance in ethics, your compliance and ethics program, really more like headlights on the car that can help you see around the curve and help you drive down that road faster when it's dark and you can't really see that far in front of you. So when we can position ourselves to be strategic advisors and not get caught up in the chaos and all the anxiety and all the concerns that are coming of clutching our pearls, the sky is falling, what does the future hold for our industry? Look, there's going to be more changes in our industry as long as I've been in here for almost a decade. It's just been constant change after constant change, and we have to just learn to kind of ride that wave. So I think, first of all, we can't get scared by the wave. Understand that there's opportunity in this, and understand that you can use this changing wind as a tailwind to drive your agenda forward, but you have to be a good business person. You have to understand where those pinch points are with respect to the stakeholders that you're serving, and you have to understand where there are additional opportunities for more engagement and start trying to push those forward. So I just think it's a time where we can expand. I kind of always have this vision of, I love playing Risk when I was younger, like taking more land. Like there's a chance for us here to take a lot more land because we have such a unique skill set. We have such a unique perspective. We're the circulatory system of the organization that allows us to really connect, disparate data points and disparate experiences within the organization to make our business more resilient. But it takes us straightening our back, putting our chest out into the reality that we're trying to create. We can't just sit in the passenger seat, because if we do, and we have a business or we have stakeholders or leaders that we're serving who don't get it, they don't get compliance, they don't get ethics, they don't get the potential impact that we can have, then the odds of us, winding up in a good spot in the midst of all this change is, low.
So here's a great comment from one of the attendees, Robert, who says, the changing whims of any administration shouldn't undermine your program. If those whims do change your company's behavior, maybe it's time to find a new company. Very elegantly, better than I, kind of made my original point again that there's a difference between compliance and what are we scaling up and scaling down, and versus ethics and integrity. And if you're scaling down your integrity, you have bigger issues at your organization. There is a couple of other comments here I'll try and get to in a moment. But one other point that I wanted to kind of unpack, or have you all unpack for me, I was noodling on the idea that even in a deregulatory world, first off, Karen, you are absolutely right that we're talking about deregulation. We haven't actually deregulated much yet. I do think that might be coming.
Right.
But you will still need the same compliance capabilities that if we get rid of a regulation, A, you, the company, you have to notice that's happened. B, you have to figure out, what does that mean for my policies? C, am I going to change my policies? Do I train people on how the policy isn't there? Like all the same stuff that we would do when regulation was going up. It seems to me you still need those same capabilities to do the same stuff, even when the environment is running backwards. So Karen, talk to me a bit about that. And, how would you frame these capabilities as something you still need, even if the tide is now going the other way?
Yeah, I love that noodling, because it's where I've been, and I know I do tend to put on rose-colored glasses sometimes, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity here in the anticipation or expectation of deregulation. First of all, not all regulation is good regulation. Some of it's overly complex, some of it's kind of unacceptably vague. It's hard to work through. So if deregulation means kind of paring things back and rebuilding them, I'm all for it. Is that what's going to happen? I'm not sure. I think we may be more to the kind of, Reagan Thatcher area where you deregulate willy-nilly, everything falls apart, and then you overregulate in response. So I don't know, that feels like the cycle we might be in. But having said that, if you are anticipating deregulation and the impact it might have on your own compliance program, your own controls, your own policies, I think it's a great opportunity to say, what was at the core of that regulation? Let's assume that at the core of that regulation, there was something good. You should be transparent with your shareholders. You should not bribe government officials to get an unfair advantage. If you go back to the core, those should still be the general principles. And I love the kind of attendee quote that you cited, Matt, that you can't just be in a company that blows with the wind. It's not a company for compliance or for any employee that has a sustainable culture that you're going to feel safe and secure in. So, I think there's that. I also think that any company who's sort of, like doing one of those evil villain things with their hands and going, yes, now we can pollute at will and bribe at will. Again, not a company you want to be in. But also let's, think about federal deregulation. I think a lot of the people on the call have been pointing out, look, there are international laws, there are laws in other companies, there are state laws. We've got now a much more complex regulatory ecosystem than we've ever worked in before. So I don't think trying to anticipate deregulation as a way of gaining some sort of big advantage it is the right way to go. Now, deregulation does, however, I think cause people to look at their policies. I think to Diana's point and to Nick's point, do we have excessive controls? Are our policies trying to get down to the nth degree to stop people from buying a government official cup of coffee and kind of losing sight of the bigger picture? I think they're good opportunities there. So good time to revisit your code, revisit your policies, revisit your code, your controls, not in anticipation that deregulation is going to let you do a whole bunch of things that you couldn't do before, but to try and get back to your basic principles of what was this intended to achieve in the first place, and how does it make sense to my organization and the people that work here and the relationships that I have with third parties.
I mean, if your doctor said, you know what, enough with these cholesterol tests, we're not doing these anymore, do you think, cool, free funnel cakes, I can have as many funnel cakes as I want? No, you don't think that, of course, because there's an implication to that. There's a cost to that. Just because you're not getting, just because cholesterol tests aren't being enforced anymore doesn't negate your responsibility to be healthy. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead, Matt. Sorry to interrupt.
I do think that raises a really good point, that if cholesterol tests are not going to be kind of enforced anymore, but you want to take care of your cholesterol and have a test, and now because it's not kind of in the enforcement body, it's not going to be covered by your health insurance, then it starts to become a problem. So these things all become interrelated. I want to.
All right, I should have thought through that analogy a little more. All right.
No, wait, we can continue with this and take it back to core principles. If your core principle is to not eat a ton or to be healthy, then you would maybe not pay for the cholesterol test because it's out of the enforcement regime, but you would still, because your values are right, not eat a ton of funnel cakes. Maybe just one a week or something. I don't know how many.
Round of applause for Diana saving it. She saved the analogy. That's phenomenal.
Except that it is totally backfired, because if you look at some of our attendee chat people, now everyone was thinking funnel cakes, Nick. So now you have completely blown everyone's diet out of the water.
I'm sorry. All right, cheat day. Today will be a cheat day, but we'll get back on the diet tomorrow, okay?
Well, I wanted to just kind of unpack a little more. What are the challenges that you are likely to encounter, or the best practices you still need to, I guess, apply in a negative world in deregulation? For example, policy management. If there's a new rule, you would not then turn around and say every manager gets to adopt their own policy for how we obey this rule. You'd never do that. So if there's a rule going away, you would not then say, let's just deregulate, get rid of the policy, get rid of those controls, without first thinking, okay, will that affect any other policies? Will the destruction of this control affect other controls? You're going to have to do a lot of the same basic stuff in reverse. And I'm trying to get my head around what that would be, or what best practices should we have for policy management, control design, training and communication in a world where regulations are shrinking. And I don't even know that all of them will, or some of them might be, but others still come forward. But could anybody tackle some of that or give some advice to the listeners about here's how to think through deregulating wisely if you're a compliance officer? Karen, Diana?
I'd love to start with that, because I do think that sometimes we have rules because we have to, right? A regulation says you have to do X, Y, Z. And so we say, okay, we follow the law, we're going to do X, Y, Z. A deregulation, taking away that rule, makes an opportunity for a company to say, does that rule still make sense to us, even absent regulation? And if it doesn't, let's get rid of it. And I think it comes down to sometimes we have a rule because we have to have a rule, and sometimes we have a rule because it's important. And then we think about why is it important, and we communicate that through our policies, through our training. Why is this rule important? Why do we ask you to behave in this way? Sometimes it's because we have to, and sometimes because there's a deeper meaning. So again, I think doing things intentionally, doing things consciously, re-examining the rules that we have and how we're communicating them. They're putting my rose-colored glasses on. There's big opportunity here. I don't know, Diana, if you agree with that.
I do, and I think going, sort of the how of Matt's question. I think that's a great thing about having a compliance program framework is I think we should do it the exact same way as if a new regulation is coming into effect. So maybe the risk is lowered because a regulation is going away. Maybe we take something out of the policy or reword it. And again, you have to do it very thoughtfully. But I think I don't think it actually changes if you have a well-managed compliance program, the day-to-day work. It just might be a bit in reverse. Maybe looking at the silver lining here is that we can actually tell the business that there are certain things that they can do that weren't particularly harmful to anybody or outside of the company's values, but now make business easier. And I don't hold me to that, because I don't know if any of this deregulation will, first of all, actually happen, or to the extent that it does happen, it'll be anything that is good news for a company. But I think when looking at it, it should be the same thing. What's the intake? What's the change in the law? How does this change our risk profile? What policies and procedures do we need to communicate? And, is this an opportunity to tell people that they have a little bit more freedom while reminding them, to do the right thing? And then same thing with the training. So, really all the elements. So I would just say that I think when approaching it, going back to don't panic, which I think we all said initially, is just handle it as if it were a new regulation, but in reverse. I don't think we need to kind of reinvent the wheel. I think what we have created in terms of the framework works very well.
Sure. Nick, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would just say, stop trying to solve for regulations and solve for what's common sense and what is the principle behind the regulation. I think many times, we've talked about this a lot recently, particularly after we talked with Andrew McBride, who had that huge declination, 45% declination. We can't check the box thinking, that perfectionist thinking that I want to get it right and I don't want to get in trouble, that served us so well, that allowed us to succeed in school and succeed in our careers. That is a quality that we obviously need, and that's beneficial for us. But I think we can oversample that tendency and turn, our programs into these check the box things. And I think now is the time to really try to get agile, to try to find the opportunities in it. I don't think they're rose-colored glasses. I think they're just glasses. Karen, because there's literally opportunity in everything. And I think there's a new opportunity for you to show up to your business as a business person, as a common sense helper, a servant to the rest of the organization, to allow the business to, pursue its mission in a more effective, efficient way. That's the mandate right now. And I think if you're trying to solve for that, you kind of show up in a different way with a little bit of a different angle than you would if you're kind of in this panic mode of, is my job going to be around in a couple of years? I think if we're adding value, we always have security. If you can create yourself, if you can create the stereotype or the reputation of being indispensable, you're always going to have a job. And again, we just have access to so many different departments, so many different data pools that can allow us to really see around the curve to a different degree than a lot of other departments. And now is the time to take advantage of it. I
would just close with one more point on this. Nick, you had said earlier there, think about the principle behind the regulation. That is true. And in the same way, I would now say companies should be thinking about what is the principle behind the deregulation. And it is mostly to allow for more innovation or more growth or less cost, but it is not, say, if we are deregulating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it is the spirit there is not to screw over consumers financially.
Right.
That's still going to be a thing. And Diana, you had mentioned if a lot of these regulations go away, employees have more freedom. Great in some ways, but they might then blunder into an accidental or even a malicious action that's still going to be costly and malicious, and the company will have to deal with somehow. So a lot of it is more just, think about risk assessments in reverse and how the deregulation would then follow on to your policies that you might repeal or not, or the training you give or you don't. But there's a lot there, and all of it still requires the same basic capabilities we've been talking about for the last 15 years. Big issue number 2, I wanted to unpack a bit more how companies should be thinking about the rollback of DEI, because I still think there's a lot of confusion that came up at the SCCE Europe conference I was at, where they're not rolling back DEI at the moment, but companies are struggling with what they can or can't do around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what they should still do for anti-discrimination and where you do or don't draw that line, because legally you cannot discriminate and you must work to avoid discrimination, but you can't necessarily have an illegal DEI program. I'm not sure I know what that means. Karen, I'm going to put you on the spot first because I know you have thought about this a lot, but how do compliance and HR teams try and decipher what the landscape here is?
Yeah, it's partly a mess and it's partly really simple. I think the messiness in some ways comes from a branding problem. DEI became a big thing, especially in the US, and companies rushed to put in very senior level, even C-suite DEI officers, brand the whole thing, kind of roll out really quick programs on top of programs that were already in place, I have to say, in most companies, to prevent discrimination, to provide equal playing fields, or at least to examine a little bit their own systems and processes for potential improvement. Look, anything that shines a light on all of that, I'm all for, but in this case, I think it backfired a little bit or a lot on the branding side. On the simple side, nothing about the executive orders here and the rhetoric that we've been hearing out of the administration changes the law. Going back to that, there hasn't been a change to the actual regulation. What was illegal before is still illegal. What was legal before is still legal, absent, maybe the kind of Harvard case that was decided by the Supreme Court that did away with the kind of affirmative action programs in universities. We've still got all of that. Companies really should be, again, thinking about maybe reframing DEI, maybe kind of rebranding it. That's fine too. I saw one company rebrand their DEI to a meritocracy program to echo what Trump has been saying. And I'm all for meritocracy. And if a program is examining where are the obstacles to meritocracy, that we are disadvantaging some parts of the population over others, that to me has the exact same objective under a different name. What disturbs me more is the part of the executive order that instructs the agencies to identify up to 9 targets, which seems to me a very dangerous kind of proactive. We're not going to respond to concerns about discrimination in organizations that have been raised. We're going to proactively go after target companies, target organizations in specific areas. And I think that there's some industries that have been targeted, really large companies are in there, financial institutions, airlines. We've seen some really scary things happening with the large law firms that have represented individuals or organizations against Trump's own interests. They've been targeted, higher education, even law enforcement agencies are in there. And law enforcement agencies have been doing a tremendous amount of work to kind of redress some of the really difficult endemic problems that they've had in the past, to address DEI opportunities and issues in their organization. But if you feel like you're under target, you're going to be really just as quick to unwind really good and positive activities as you maybe were to kind of jump on DEI bandwagons and roll out big complex programs. So I am really concerned there. I'm also concerned about some of the things Trump has been saying in the LGBTQ space. You know, we have a Supreme Court decision that extends Title VII protections on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, which seems really contrary to some of the things that we're hearing. So where the EEOC goes in its instruction to increase their enforcement and increase their kind of view, I feel like the EEOC is a little in between a rock and a hard place in terms of enforcement. And just say one more thing, so that there is so much to say here, is that I do think companies, first of all, again, back to basic principles. What's important to us? What diversity within our own population do we already have? What talent is out there that we want to make sure that we're attracting? How fairly are we treating people? Where's our level playing field in terms of advancement opportunities, pay equality, all these different things, some of which are protected by law and some of which are just the right thing to do for a company's prosperity. But I do think compliance programs need to be particularly watchful as companies are grappling with this and communicating internally. For one thing, you've got the angry majority, the people who feel that they have been discriminated against with the rollout of all these different programs within organizations, to listen to them with honest and open ears, because I think you're going to be hearing a lot more from them. And also from the kind of upset, concerned, and potentially alienated minority populations, to make sure that they feel reassured that there isn't going to be a backlash here. And I think that that's going to be a really tough thing for compliance programs to examine and address appropriately, balance that within your organization.
So Nick and Diana, let me get your thoughts on this. And in particular, when I think a lot about DEI, and I'm still quite confused about what is or isn't going to be permissible anymore. To a certain extent, I feel like you know it when you see it, which therefore leaves companies in a damned if you do, damned if you don't position. But I think a lot about the word inclusion, because if employees do not feel like they are included in the corporate culture, feel actively, then they're going to check out. And that is a slippery slope for ethics and compliance programs, because I don't feel included, I'm not going to bother calling the hotline anymore. Or I don't feel included, I'm going to call the hotline to complain about me, and I'm the minority employee complaining about it, and the white employee next to me is also for some reason doesn't feel included. They could wind up calling basically about the same complaint, that each one of them is feeling included. This not included. This is going to tie companies into knots, I think. And I'm still stuck on how a company finds its footing and finds messages to stick with and plant their flag on. This is what we are going to do. Nick, let me ask you that first, and then Diana. What advice do you have, or what thoughts do you have?
Somebody put a comment in the chat about Costco, and this is a little bit more of a general example, but I think it just comes down to what do you actually care about? I think if values actually matter, they actually drive behaviors, even if they're unpopular. Of course, no one is recommending to do anything illegal. We don't want DEI programs that are viewed as discriminatory. And I think understanding what's in bounds and what's out of bounds is a good first step. But, whether you call it meritocracy, whether you call it DEI, like Karen was saying in our last little segment, there's some principle behind it. There's something that is trying to be, there's some problem that this initiative is trying to solve. And if that problem is still in place in your organization, then I think you have to figure out a way to solve it, if in fact that's important for your business, for your bottom line, for the stakeholder group that you've prioritized. So I think it's easy to just get kind of caught up in the like Diana was saying, it's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the saber rattling and the things that we're hearing and the commentary and all that kind of stuff. I think that's a lot of noise that can really cause us to lose focus on the things that matter most. And again, I think the beautiful thing about life is you can do whatever you want. So you can build the program you want. You can work in the company that you want. And if those values, those foundational values, one way or another, if they don't overlap with yours, and you don't feel like you can fight City Hall, then this is America. You can find a company that better resonates with your particular value set. But I just, it's kind of back to that don't panic thing. And I think it's about, solving for the outcome we're trying, that we have a vision for,
Diana, what would you say?
Well, I think I echo everything that Karen and Nick said, and I think maybe just I don't think there's an easy answer to this. The executive order was signed very, literally in a moment, but these are programs that have been built over years. It's an executive order that's been in the prior executive order for many years. There's state laws. There's a company's values and what their goals are. So I would just encourage everybody, who's dealing with this in their own organization to not make any hasty changes, to just look at what do we as an organization actually want to achieve and what do we feel like the law requires. And then I think the third pillar is how do our employees feel? And I'm not saying that should dictate, but I think it's important to have those conversations. So yeah, I don't think anyone exactly knows what the right answer is. And keep in mind, these are going to go, these things are going to go through the courts and get paused and stopped and whatnot. So I would just advise people to be thoughtful about it without and not feel like they need to be hasty. And as Nick said, like ultimately, like you can design the life and the company and the compliance program you want. So this is a good time to start. If you think that there might need to be some changes, is it a good time to start thinking about it? If you want to hold the line like some companies are doing, that's also a good time to start thinking about it.
All right. Now, next issue, because you cannot have a webinar without mentioning artificial intelligence. I believe that is a new rule that I have seen a steady stream of either state attorneys general or state legislatures moving forward with new rules about AI or new guidance about AI. And so I am still stuck on how companies can keep track of what's happening. Like some of what's going on with artificial intelligence is just basic regulatory change management. How are you going to figure out what these state level people are saying? And then how do you do a risk assessment for the risks that AI is bringing? And I don't even know how much is AI bringing new risks or how much is it converting old risks into new manifestations that you, the compliance team, you're going to have to figure that out and track that. So I have some just basic red meat risk assessment, regulatory change issues I want to go through here. But I'll start again with Karen. Like, how does the compliance team stay ahead of this? What state officials are saying, and then, they said that. What am I supposed to do with this now? How do I figure that out? What would you advise them, Karen?
Yeah, I think it's a huge question for compliance officers, partly because it's an area of operations that's moving really fast, for one, and for another, which is a subject matter that a lot of compliance officers and their teams are not really equipped to handle on their own. So my first thought is that you've got to tackle AI with something of a cross-functional team, not just try and deal with it within the compliance office yourself. Make sure that you're getting the right subject matter advice and expertise. But on the regulatory front, I feel like it's back to the future with GDPR, and privacy laws. So you had one really sophisticated set of very principles, human rights-based regulations that apply to a lot of the trading partners that our companies have, or to our company's own operations outside the U.S. That establish kind of principles. Then in the U.S., you started to see cropping up the different state laws, California kind of setting the scene, but we've seen really differentiated laws coming out of other companies and compliance departments trying to grapple with this real web of privacy law. And I feel like AI is starting the same way. We've got the EU AI Act, and now we have a number of state laws that we're looking at and grappling, taking a look at how does that affect our own operations, trying to create almost an entirely new risk area program. So, it's back to risk. What are the risk confronting our organization. What AI are we using, which I think is a huge issue for companies, is where's AI being used within our organization, either through our own creation or more difficult to catalog sometimes in our third-party relationships. And then what's the regulatory overlay on that, and where is the regulation heading, and how are we going to manage that, and not to kind of similar with privacy programs, not to kind of overthink the program in a way that is out of sync with your risks and your use of AI, but to remain agile, to develop that program as AI regulation and as AI use is promulgated throughout the organization. But I think it's a really tough topic. I continue to educate myself in AI, and I continuously feel like I am behind in what the issues are and where AI is. So a little overwhelmed. I think
it's
maybe
going so fast. It's crazy.
More towards panic mode, and I think, Nick, that you need to add the Hitchhiker's Guide to your book rotation, because it's like,
we should. That would be good.
Let me give a more specific example. I believe it was the state attorney general of Oregon. It was either Oregon or California, or possibly both, put out guidance about AI and its risks. And all of it was already pre-existing consumer protection and privacy law. Some of it just general privacy and consumer protection. Some of it specific to healthcare, and basically said, you company using AI, you still can't violate these laws. So right. I am thinking, how would a compliance officer now, what's the conversation you have to go to business units who might be thinking, AI, this is going to be great. I can do more stuff and all this. And you have to tell them, slow your roll. Let's think about how this might affect our legal exposure and loop in legal and what is that conversation going to look like or have to be like? Diana, let me ask you that.
Yeah, I actually think, Matt, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, is AI just doing the same things but in a different way? And I would pose yes. Everything that AI is doing is work that internally companies have done. Now they can do it faster, they can process data differently, but it's essentially the same functions, just done faster at scale, potentially combining data that hasn't been combined before. So I actually think the privacy laws, when GDPR came in, into effect in 2018, was a much more seismic change for compliance than AI, because I think AI actually slots, as you noted, very nicely into what we need to be considering for privacy and for consumer protection. So it is a new tool. It is an intimidating technology because it is changing so fast. But I think when you're looking at it conceptually, it goes back to how are we going to protect our consumers and our employees from misuse of something that's very powerful and has a lot of capabilities that a single human could not perform? How are we going to protect data privacy in line with those laws? I think those are the things that can help ground the sort of overwhelming pace of AI. And the other piece of advice I would give is just, I think everyone in compliance should start educating themselves on what AI is and isn't, and what it'll really help you understand. To the extent people haven't done this yet, don't be intimidated by it. Just put a Google alert for new AI laws or updates in AI, or just I wouldn't say a book, because by the time the book is published, things will be different. But look at the IAPP and just kind of get comfortable with what the technology is, because there's a lot of AI out there that, when you really look at it, is an amazing tool. And yes, the business can do amazing things with it, and they should, and you can help them embrace that. And then there are other types of technology that are a little bit terrifying. And I think the role of compliance is to be able to quickly spot the difference and ask the right questions before the business engages.
One thing I'm struck by with AI is that a lot of these rules, a lot of the warnings from attorneys general, it's about disclosing that the person, the consumer, is interacting with an AI thing. And that leads me to think compliance officers are going to have to spend a lot of time with the rest of the business figuring out where exactly do we want to use AI. For example, I think AI is fine in the hiring process, but are we using AI to narrow it from 10,000 applications to 1,000 applications or 10,000 applications to 3? Something there feels very different to me, and like 10,000 to 3 is a lot. So right. I like a lot of this is just figuring out where are we going to put AI and humans in the business processes we have, and where does the handoff happen? Nick, you've talked about this before. I don't know if you remember that, but you have. So tell me a bit about how you think companies can try and figure this out, and what's the right thing to do there.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, we're in this really weird this weird kind of transitionary time. And some of us on this call were here for kind of a similar type of transitionary time when like the internet was taking over. And I mean, you know, when I was in high school, we weren't allowed to use Wikipedia. Okay, we had to go and find actual books. And now you can use whatever on the web, right? So that transition has happened where the trust for this technology has kind of hit a tipping point where now it's totally relied on, and it's not questioned to the extent that it was in, you know, the 90s or whatever. So I think, you know, when the next generation is in all of our positions, they're probably not going to have like the level of comfort around AI is probably going to be, you know, so high that disclosure thing that is kind of current right now, I can't imagine that that's going to still be in play 20 years from now. So in this transition time, I think, again, it's on us to, like, there's just a lot of opportunity in this. There's a lot of opportunity for us to show up to the business. Again, I'm kind of responding to this this stereotype that we're always talking about, where we feel like we're apart from the business instead of a part of the business. And again, I think moving from that bumper sticker to the headlight, you know, perception within the organization is only going to come from, you know, reframing our interaction with the business. Is going to come from interacting and showing up in a different way. So again, like Karen was just saying, this AI stuff is changing so much. There's so many, you know, there's so many different, you know, tools and stuff out right now. For any particular use case of AI that's maybe out of bounds or is creating a risk, there is another way to get that same AI benefit in bounds. And I think it's incumbent on us to become experts in some of these sort of ancillary fields. We have to be behavioral science experts, right? We obviously have to be experts on regulations. We also have to be experts on interpersonal skills and experts at helping the business understand this technology and figure out a way that they can leverage it to get those efficiency gains that all of your competitors are going to be getting, but do it in a way that, you know, keeps the car on the tracks. So, you know, to kind of answer the question specifically, I think Karen touched on it. I think taking a broad inventory of like, how is it being used right now, not from a hall monitor perspective, but from like a true curiosity perspective, so that you can sort of, you know, run that through the, you know, the machine that is your brain and, you know, understand where there might be sort of hot spots of risk. I think that is only possible, though, to the extent you have kind of authentic relationships within the organization. So kind of getting back to that basic blocking and tackling, what kind of connection points you have in the network that is your business, and are you, you know, putting your finger on that AI pulse to start to understand where some of those use cases anecdotally might be in play.
All right, and yeah, for anybody,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I just did want to say, though, that there is a complexity and a perhaps quick rush to trust in AI without understanding that it is a tool that needs to be configured, so that the kind of the information that the AI is building on, these kind of large language models, the information it's being fed, if it's not being done, if you're not identifying those risks, then the tool is faulty, and you don't see that it's faulty until something blows up. I grew up before. I remember my dad getting a calculator for his business that really only did the 4 functions, and it cost like $1,000. But calculator is artificial intelligence. But if you don't ask it to give you the answer that you need, you don't put in the right data, it's going to give you a false answer. And that's my concern, is that we're not kind of front loading the risk assessment of the AI tool, that we're not understanding how it's not functioning on its own. It's functioning on the basis of instructions that you give it, and how are we configuring those instructions in a way that's going to get us the right answer. And, I hate to keep going back to The Hitchhiker's Guide, although it's one of my favorite books, but, that whole kind of million-year instruction that was given to Big Blue that spit out the answer 53, the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 53. It's like, well, that means nothing. We haven't asked the right question. So I'm excited by AI. I think there's huge amounts of potential there. My concern is like so much technology is that everyone jumps on it and then we kind of have to back off and it's too late to kind of backtrack and fix things. But I have the opposite of rose-colored glasses, I guess, on that one.
Wipe those off. This is a brave new world.
I'm sorry, 42 is the answer. 42.
42, yes.
The last issue I want to try and sneak in, the last big news thing, is when I was at the Europe conference earlier this week, I had attended a fascinating session on leaks, employees leaking confidential information that might blow up an investigation of yours or cause an investigation. And also there was an item in the news not long ago about Facebook, for example, recently fired 20 leakers who had both leaked some news about Mark Zuckerberg's policy changes and then leaked the warning for management, do not leak this. And I was just struck that somebody had pointed out at the session, and I've seen this on LinkedIn as well, if you have a big problem with leaks, you have a big problem with your corporate culture because people are not speaking up to management, they're speaking out to others. And so I have been really intrigued that the amount of leaking going on in your company might be a symptom of a dysfunctional speak-up culture. Nick, let me hear what you think about that, and then Diana, and then Karen, and it's going to have to be about 1 minute each, but give me a quick take on this.
So I think marketing campaigns are wildly underutilized in our profession. Marketing departments inside your organization, they're always running new campaigns for a new tool or a new product or a new offering, right? There's always a new, fresh piece of content that's coming out to try to drive the behaviors that marketing is intending to drive. So if you have a retaliation problem, or you think you might have a retaliation problem, or if you have a leak, or you think you might have a leak problem, you should run a campaign on that to address that issue. And you don't have to do it in a sort of a heavy-handed way. You can say it in a way, hey, if you feel the desire to leak something, it's usually because you haven't been heard. We have these channels set up, again, I'm just kind of brainstorming this live, but we have these channels set up to figure out this stuff because we are, our department is here to try to make this workplace right and to stamp out the wrongdoing and to build an authentic culture of integrity, right? There's a bunch of different ways you can message that, but I think you have to hit this stuff head on. And I think we do too much of kind of putting up a poster, sitting back, waiting, crossing our fingers that people are going to look at that poster and remember the policy and remember, their intro to the company and do that algebra and then act the way we want. I think if we can be more direct and be more transparent about the issue that we're actually concerned about, we usually, at least in my experience, you usually kind of shake the tree and a couple of apples fall out. You usually can get some engagement to start addressing it that then can create an opportunity to communicate out that addressing of the concern. So right. I just think attacking it head on is the key.
Diana, you got 60 seconds for your take on leaks.
Okay, I'll go fast. First, I think every big prominent company is going to have a leak at one point or another that hires a lot of employees. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. There's always going to be employees at any size company that are unhappy with how things were managed or how they were treated. What I would love to see a company do in response to this is actually then go to the rest of the employees and say, we want to hear from you, and actually use that leak as a way to propel a greater speak up culture. I think that might be, a good way to, I don't want to say turn things around, but to at least start to address the problems. Is it indicative of larger cultural issues at the company? Like I said, you're always going to have this, I think, but I do think it's something that you need to look at as, okay, we're bleeding here and we need to take care of this issue. So, all right, I think my 60 seconds are up, but
if you want trust in the organization and you want to build trust and there's a freaking elephant in the room, then talk about the elephant in the room. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Karen?
Make friends with the elephant is my advice.
Karen, what's final thought might you?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it, but as usual, I have something to add. I think if you haven't determined that the leak of confidential information is not because you've got a bad policy or that you failed to communicate, people's behavior, that if it's been inadvertent, that's one bucket. The other bucket, though, to me, it's like you said, like Nick and Diana said, to me, it's just like this giant red culture flag. And to me, it's about loyalty as much as it is about trust. How do you engender employee loyalty to the company to the extent that they're willing to curtail their own activity, including talking about confidential information? Once they talk about confidential information, to me, that's a clear sign that the loyalty to the company is broken, and you can expect a whole bunch more misconduct elsewhere in the organization. You better start looking for it.
Well, we are out of time now, but this has been a great conversation as always, and thank you to all the attendees. I know our attendee chat was quite spicy earlier and active, but we appreciate that. So, Nick, I don't know if you want to wrap it up.
3,600 emojis. Amazing. Round of applause. One more round of applause for this amazing panel. I forgot to mention this before, but I just dropped the link for Radical Compliance. It's Matt's blog. If you have not signed up for it, click there now. On the right-hand side, there's a little spot to put your email in. Best thing you'll do today, I guarantee it. Next Thursday, we have a phenomenal session. We're diving deep on our benchmark report. There's going to be a bunch of tips and a bunch of tactics, techniques that you can implement immediately to improve your program. So hope you can join us for that. We're going to be giving away a ton of books. It's going to be a huge party. It's going to be way more fun than the NAVEX one. Okay, there I said it. All right, love you all. See you next Thursday. Take care.
Thank you.